Okay, so since Odell signed with the Rams, since that news is out there, I felt like this is the time now that we can actually have a nuanced, non fanatical or hysterical conversation about the Odell Beckham era in Cleveland. And this probably will be the last real time I dedicate an entire video to specifically Odell Beckham and Cleveland, just because, he don't play on the team anymore. He's in a completely different conference. It's not really going to be that relevant of a conversation going forward outside of maybe like a couple of games that they play each other in if he stays on the LA Rams. So this is pretty much it for the drama. And I just wanted to put one place where everybody can kind of hear both sides to the argument, hear what I think about it, and just kind of get a full grip of what is going on, because there's a ton of people that will lie to you one way or the other about this situation. And I think it's a very nuanced and complex situation. And it's a disappointing failure for everybody involved. And I want to start this conversation by just going into the grievances, right? What were the specific grievances that every party had, right? If you're looking at Odell Beckham, what was his grievance? Was it that he wasn't getting targets? Partly. Was it that the team wasn't winning? Partly. Was it that the offense was also looking awful while he wasn't getting targets? 100% probably in there, right? If you were a wide receiver and you felt like you were one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and the team's offense is horrible, putting up 10 points against a team that they should put up more than 10 points against, you would be frustrated too, right? I think that is a relatable part of his frustration. His frustration is very relatable. I understand throughout the 2.5 years he's been here why he would be frustrated with his role. And there's a lot of blame that the coaches have for that. Some goes to the GM as well. Some goes to Baker Mayfield, and some of this goes to Odell Beckham as well. But I think Odell's biggest grievance ultimately was the fact that he just didn't feel like he was a major part of this offense for what he felt like he could provide to this offense, right? I know we've all been in situations, football, sports related or not, maybe at work, where you felt like you could help the team, right? The coworkers or whatever your team situation is, that you felt like you could help the team, but they just won't let you help, right? Or they just won't let you be a big part of the group or whatever it is, and you just end up being frustrated, right? I've been in those situations plenty of times. I've been that frustrated. I've voiced my frustration before about those situations. And I completely understand why he would feel that way. Now, again, how did he go about getting himself off the team? Leaves a lot to be desired here, but I understand the grievance. Now, the Browns' grievances come out over the last few weeks. I'm going to keep it honest with you guys. If it made sense, I would go with it. But most of the stuff the Browns are leaking about why they had issues with Odell, yes, it makes sense on a base level, but it doesn't make sense in the context of everything else that they're talking about. Like, they're leaking out this stuff that Odell was a freelancer, right? And that's relatively true. He was freelancing in the offense. But when it comes to, I guess I'm just going to jump to what Kevin Stefanski's blame in this is the reason Odell was freelancing is kind of your fault as an offensive coordinator and as a coach, right? And why it's Kevin's fault is Odell's entire stay here. Now, I understand Kevin Stefanski inherited Odell. He didn't go and acquire Odell purposely, right? If Kevin Stefanski were here the first year John Dorsey was here, I'm pretty sure Odell doesn't get traded for, because it's not a piece that Kevin Stefanski begs for. But the thing is once you come to a team that does have Odell Beckham on there, you have to make a decision. Are you going to integrate him deeply into this offense or not? Right? That's the big decision that you have to make. Are you going to have use for Odell Beckham? And are you going to be able to use him like Odell Beckham? Or could you just get another, not bad receiver, but a lesser and cheaper receiver to fill the role that you're asking Odell to do, and you can get rid of Odell for assets, right? Like, that's the big question you had to answer. Kevin thought that he could make it work with a half measure with Odell, which was, I'm not going to fully integrate him into this offense, but I'm going to have him play a special, not even a special, but I'm going to have him be this decoy on steroids, essentially, right? And it just didn't work. Half measures often in the NFL don't work. And that's what Kevin did. He did a half measure and it didn't work. And that's Kevin Stefanski's fault. Also, when you're leaking out stuff like, hey, Odell didn't run the proper route and that really messed up the entire offense, I get why they're leaking that stuff out, because they're trying to explain away why it is that the offense looks so bad in the first half of the year. But consider this. In my opinion, if the Browns' offense structurally is not robust enough to withstand one player running a different route, then you got major issues there, right? Because what's going to happen in the playoffs? Teams are going to take things away. They're going to take certain routes away. They're going to, if one player is not improvising, they'll make it so that the effect would be the same as a player improvising, right? They're going to take you out of rhythm. They're going to take you out of timing. They're going to take things away in the playoffs, right? They're going to specifically game plan to take things away. So if your offense is not robust enough that can happen, whether it be a player running a different route or a player being taken away in a certain play, and the offense can't function as normal or can't function to a decent level, that's Kevin Stefanski's fault, and that's something that Kevin Stefanski should fix up. So Kevin, I think, takes a lot of blame in this failure, basically just because I don't think he really tried to do anything about it. I think he tried to treat Odell on this roster as any other player that would play that role, and I just don't think that was the proper approach. I think you could have gotten more out of Baker and Odell if you managed that situation properly. Now, Baker, he's not free of blame by any means in this situation. I'm happy he's had a good game. I'm happy Baker continues to look good. I want Baker to look as good as possible because that means more wins. I am a Baker Mayfield fan. I have cheered him on. I think he's a top 10 quarterback when he plays well. I think he's a top 8 quarterback. So don't sit here and say just because I have a criticism of Baker Mayfield, I'm some kind of Baker hater, because I know there's people who will do this. But Baker has a good amount of blame in why this whole thing didn't work. Odell has blame too, and we'll get to that. But Baker has some blame. He had been inconsistent this year, and throughout the 3 years he has been here, he's been inconsistent, right? Either he has been the guy that I have waxed poetically about being that top 8 quarterback, or he has been mediocre. There has been those two extremes with Baker Mayfield here. And honestly, if Baker had been more consistent in the last 2.5 years, I don't think the freelancing becomes the issue that it became in this offense. I think if Baker is able to hit Odell on some of those plays where he's designed to actually get open, there's a play against Minnesota. There's a bunch of plays throughout this year where, that was the read. He was supposed to get open. Baker missed the throw. If he just rewards Odell with those throws and those catches and make sure that you get that production to him, then I think you have less of a problem having him commit to this offense. So ultimately, if Baker plays better, I think this is a lesser issue, and I don't think it balloons to this point. And I think you're able to have a good offense with Odell on the team without him doing all the stuff that is driving the coaching staff crazy, reportedly, with the freelancing. And again, I want to stress this. For the Cleveland Browns, their ability to throw the ball has to, absolutely 100%, has to be more robust than if one player does not get to one spot at the exact time that they're supposed to. That cannot be how this offense functions and it be productive against top-level defenses in top-level situations, right? Like, that just can't be how that functions. It has to be more robust than that. If it's not more robust than that right now, the Browns are in trouble. I would like to believe that it is for my own sanity. But again, if the issue was that Odell was freelancing and that really destroyed the entire offense, that's not a good thing for the Cleveland Browns because they need to be more robust than one player not getting to one spot. Because if that is all it takes to throw off this offense and have it look like it did the first 8 weeks of the season, you're really in trouble. Like, that's not a good thing. Hopefully that's not the case. I don't really think that's the case. I think that's just, to be honest with you, the propaganda that the Browns are leaking out there, right? They need a side of the argument. Odell's dad has presented his side of the argument, right, where he pretty much blames most of this on Baker if you just read between the tea leaves. It seems to be where most of this blame is pointed at in Odell's camp. And I don't think that's the right place to blame it. I really do think Kevin's sliding on a lot of blame here. But nonetheless, again, the offense just has to be more robust than that. And I don't think that is the case. I've seen this offense get players taken away, get players bumped off of timing routes, and still be able to function. I know Baker can improvise well. I think the biggest issue in why this didn't work, it has nothing to do with what's been reported, right? What's been reported is two camps throwing mud at each other and trying to make the other seem like the problem when it's just not that simple. The true reason I think this didn't work are two things. It comes to deferment and it comes to timing. One, this whole Odell Baker thing, wrong place, wrong time. Just wrong place, wrong time for this to happen. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at it like this. When Odell came to this team, Baker had just gotten off of that rookie year where he looked amazing, where everybody was behind him, and the front office had went as far as to hire the coach that he wanted because that's the level of commitment that they were to Baker Mayfield. John Dorsey drafted him number 1 overall. He was obviously committed to Baker, felt vindicated because of the good year. This was Baker Mayfield's team when Odell got here in 2019. There was no doubt about it. This was 100% Baker's Mayfield's team. What's the issue with that? When Odell came to Cleveland, Odell was 27, 26? Like, he was in his prime. He had been a top 5, if not the best receiver in football the 2 years previous. And he's coming into a situation with a second-year quarterback. Now, he wasn't here in 2018. He doesn't know completely to the extent that this is Baker Mayfield's team. He's coming into a situation where he thinks he's supposed to help Baker become a better quarterback with his wide receiving skill by giving him somebody to rely on and depend on, where Baker sees Odell as somebody who's just here to help him extend the long ball. So you have that conflict when they come in. Again, this is me just speculating on why I think this didn't work. It is not me reporting anything, so please don't aggregate this as such. When you get down to it, the core issue between Baker Mayfield and Odell wasn't the offense being strictly timing and all this stuff that's come out from the Browns side, or it wasn't that Baker's just a terrible quarterback. Neither of those two things are as true as people want you to believe. The biggest issue was that neither player deferred to each other, right? At the end of the day, it's like dancing, right? And both players wanted to lead, which led to both of them just stepping on each other's feet nonstop. I said this so many times watching film and breaking it down for you guys, but it just seems like Baker has this right answer that goes this way. Odell has this right answer that goes that way, and they never have the same answer at the same time, so it just looks completely jumbled. But both options could have worked. They just never choose the same one, and that's the core of it, right? They don't defer to each other. If Odell would be willing to defer to Baker, I think this would have worked. I think if Baker was more willing to defer to Odell, this whole thing didn't work. But it just didn't happen. And there's good reasons on why that didn't happen, right? For Baker, like, this is his team. This was his team when Odell was brought in. Odell comes in. They have a rough year. Odell gets hurt in 2020. And then Baker has the best stretch of games in his entire career. And then, boom, it's back to being 100,000% his team at the start of 2021, right? And then you get to 2021, and then the same thing in 2019 happens, where it's just not working. And, it's rinse, wash, repeat there, right? Baker does not want to defer because he sees this is his team, and he's right in that claim. Like, he's a good enough quarterback to where he should expect his wide receivers to defer to him. But also, Odell's not just any other wide receiver. So in Odell's eyes, I can see why he didn't want to defer to Baker Mayfield. This is the dude who's at 1,500 receiving yards. He was on pace to break like a bunch of Jerry Rice's records, and he wants to get back on that pace, and he wants to help the team in the ways that he knows he can help. So he wants to take the lead because he feels like he's the older player. He has had more years of experience in the NFL, and, he should be relied on for not only his athletic ability, but also his experience, and that should be valued and respected there too. So maybe Baker should follow his lead and trust him more. Baker thinks that Odell should have trusted him more, and that's the conflict, right? It's a people issue at the end of the day. Both dudes thought that each should defer to each other, and instead what we got was a bunch of half measures, was a bunch of compromises that just didn't work, right? And jumbled up the offense and clogged up everything and made things worse. That's why I think this is a mutual failure. Kevin Stefanski could have done things to kind of mediate this deferment issue and help things along the way, but he didn't. Odell and Baker could have just decided that they're going to defer to one or the other, and this could have worked. But ultimately, nobody did anything. Nobody tried to fix anything. We all just hummed along like there was no problem and kept running into the same problems, which makes this a mutual failure. The problem isn't that Odell's washed or that he's a bad player. He's going to be good. I think he's going to be fine in LA. The problem isn't that Baker's a terrible quarterback with quote unquote, and I've heard this several places. I don't know where this comes from, but no arm talent. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Like, if your summation of Baker Mayfield and your biggest criticism of him is you're saying he has no arm talent, I don't think you've watched enough Baker Mayfield. Like, that is a ridiculous take to have. Like, the one thing he has is arm talent. That's special. That's why he went number one overall. Everything else about him, he's not the greatest runner of all time. There's questions about how well he sees the field. Those things are things that you could criticize about Baker Mayfield, but his arm talent, that's ridiculous. That is not true at all. And I think we've gotten to a place with this conversation where either people are going to take one extreme or the other, and they're dug in so deep that they're going to end up looking ridiculous either way, because both of those extremes just aren't true. If you're somebody in the Odell camp that swears to God that Baker's a terrible quarterback and he's going to be trash without Odell, you're going to look pretty foolish because Baker's going to be a good quarterback right now. Like, he's a good quarterback. And if you're in the other camp that thinks Odell's completely washed and terrible and he can't run a route anymore, you're going to look foolish because Odell's not washed. He's still good. He can still run routes. He just was not in a system that worked for him, and he wasn't in a quarterback-wide receiver relationship that was going to work for him. I think that's the biggest issue, right? Neither of them could defer to each other to lead, and we ended up here. And it's a missed opportunity. And honestly, if Baker were a seventh-year pro and Odell got traded to this team as a second-year wide receiver, this probably would have worked. If Odell were like a 10-year pro and Baker were in his second year, this probably would have worked. But the timing in which both of these players intersected, it probably was never going to work because they were never going to defer to each other at this point in time. And it's unfortunate, but hey, unfortunate things happen in the NFL. It would appear that Odell not being on this team and that friction of who's going to defer to who not existing for Baker Mayfield makes Baker a better quarterback when he knows that his wide receivers are going to defer to him. He can trust where they're going to be. And I would assume that Odell not having that same friction would probably make him a better player. But I also don't think that there's a team that Odell can go to that he would make so good right now that the Browns couldn't beat. So ultimately, I'm not too pressed about where he landed, how that's going to be. It's an interesting fit there in LA, but let me know what you guys think about this entire situation. Let's try not to be super extreme on this, even though I know a lot of people are going to go to extremes here. What do you think either party, Odell, Baker, or the coaching staff, choose one, what do you think that party could have done to make this work? Because ultimately, I think this could have worked. It's just a lot of variables made it impossible. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.